If, like Jane Austen's Charlotte Lucas in Pride and Prejudice, you're 27 with no money or prospects, living at home and still single, society has deemed you a failure, so you make the pragmatic decision of marrying an undesirable partner to escape judgment. Fast forward nearly 2 centuries, and not much seems to have changed, in terms of pressure at least. In 2001, one of the most memorable episodes of the American TV show Friends, the one where they all turn 30, Rachel bursts into tears over the fact she's still not married and doesn't have children. But where did our notion of the right time even come from? And when did things start to shift? Is the concept of milestones setting us up for failure? Recent studies show that the ideal age trajectory for experiencing major life milestones, such as starting a full-time job, marrying, and having a child, has barely changed since the 50s.
Feels like those are just things that you do. As you go to college, you think about getting a job, your first internship, getting another job, getting a promotion, moving out on your own, getting your first apartment. Sometimes I think these things feel like normal to people.
But in the last 70 years, America changed radically. In the United States, with increasingly limited access to affordable education, healthcare, parental leave, milestones can feel like a pipe dream.
Longer lives also impose challenges. How do we ensure that young people are on a right trajectory to financial and emotional well-being?
So, how did these milestones begin to evolve? In the United States, the 50s are often described as the last traditional decade, a glorified post-war period where ideals like the American dream and its youthful aesthetics circulated, and all these milestones were ticked off at a relatively young age.
But accelerating greatly in the 1960s, this pathway was increasingly described as a route to stagnation, as finding yourself in a rut, and people began to think of adulthood increasingly as a time for experimentation and growth.
One of the biggest shifts occurred in the economy.
So up until 50 years ago, you could get a job in a steel plant or an automobile factory that would pay quite well. But beginning in the 50s, those jobs began to disappear. And in their place arose these jobs that were knowledge economy jobs. And all of that took more education in the past. It wasn't something you could just walk in and be taught how to do in a day or two. These were things that required years of knowledge and preparation.
But as enrollment in higher education continues to soar, so does the cost of attendance. Today, more than 2/3 of graduates carry student debt. And if you're graduating in 2020, you're entering one of the toughest job markets in decades. And then there's getting married and starting a family. Things really started to shift at home when the women's movement opened up new possibilities in the workplace, and the approval of the pill shattered the age-old link between sex and marriage.
In the 1960s, one where women can gain access to the pill, and so they can now control when they want to get pregnant, and they can invest more years in education, they can pursue and spend more time in work.
Half a century later, following the Great Recession, more than 1 in 5 adults between the ages of 18 to 34 said they postponed getting married and having a child because of the economy.
We have more individualized pathways, and as a result, there are fewer norms and expectations to guide us. But we also have other generations, older generations, who lived by a different set of norms and pathways and expectations. And those are the folks who are making policies. And so you have a lot of pressure.
In Yuval Levin's 2017 book, The Fractured Republic, the author explores how Americans still view the second half of the 20th century through the nostalgic gaze of boomers and their policies. As our life course becomes more individualized, so does our need to reinterpret genuine symbols of success and setback. And if you fall anywhere outside this outdated boomer model, how are milestones redefined?
My experience having been undocumented, and from what I hear in my community, there is always a redefining of milestones and timelines, celebrating their immigrant anniversaries because they impact people's livelihood. A lot of people, because of the pandemic, noticed how this country is like holding on, by a thread.
With the pandemic, life has been put on hold for everyone. For some, it means delayed dreams. For others, taking the time to reflect and potentially changing our path entirely. But we can take comfort in one thing.
Our longevity has increased, but we have gained 30 extra years in the last century to our life expectancy. And so because we live longer, we have more time to stretch out our milestones, so we don't have to rush as much.
Being honest about what folks' realities look like and then providing resources for people to make their own decisions based on their own circumstances, I think is really important.
People really do want more flexibility in their lives and an ability to reinvent themselves at almost any age. Every circumstance of life has changed, and we've got to seize the responsibility to create meaningful lives of our own.
Today, in the age of social media, smoke and mirrors, other people's roadmaps are harder to ignore. But it's important to remember that our own bucket list for success stays flexible and is tailored not just to our subjective ideals, but our current realities.